All right, it looks like we're getting set here with our live stream. There we go. There's always that little bit of delay that messes me up here, but I think we're good to go. I got my articles in hand. We're going to have some fun in light of a tragedy and a colossal collapse in the world order as we've known it, the neoliberal world order. Come on in, gang. There's lots and lots to chat about. Put in your comments. I'll try to answer some questions as we go through and all this. Also, make sure the sound is coming out all right, but we are live. Everything looks like it's going well. And today is February 25th. I'm starting off by getting, hey, Tim, I'm starting a Dr. Turkey. Hey, watch out for that autocorrect. I know, I've heard it. I found out that my grandfather was born in 1898. He was born at the end of the 19th century. He said they used to call him Turkey back then, too. So I guess this is just a perpetual problem. I guess I have to move to Turkey at some point, and then it's a title of honor for Ataturk. But it is February 25th. I'm starting off by getting the date right, unlike yesterday's video on the collapse of the neoliberal globalist order, where I started off with saying today is March 24th. Mark this on your calendar. This is the day the liberal globalist world order collapsed. And everyone's like going, dude, it's February. But I was up really late the night before, much late. In my old age, I'm becoming such a wimp when it comes to how late I stay up. Although I'm not as bad as Eddie Van Halen. I heard that Eddie Van Halen, the great late Eddie Van Halen, ended up hitting the sack around 7:30 at night. He really couldn't deal with it. He just didn't want to be up late, which is probably good. So I was up, past midnight the night before, so I didn't even know what date it is. So anyway, come on in, gang, one and all. No, you're not late, JJ Castleberry. Come on in, guys. It's great to have you. So we need to obviously talk about the latest of what's going on with Russia's offensive against Ukraine, which broke out in blitzkrieg fashion. 36 hours ago or so. So obviously we've got tons to talk about today regarding the latest in this massive military offensive by Russia and Ukraine. We've got bumbling Biden, his press conference. My, oh my, do we have a lot to talk about with that press conference. Well, you know what? We don't have a lot to talk about in that press conference. And I think about it. I mean, it could be summed up in one word, and that is embarrassing. But we'll talk about it at least. It was a disaster by every measure. We'll take a look at what social media thought about it. We got the latest round of polling for Biden that's just come out, which is just absolutely devastating. It's fascinating to me. It's fascinating. Sorry, while I clean off my glasses here, to see the mainstream media do everything they possibly can to try to make what is such an obvious defeat for Biden. Remember, he's the guy who's going to stare down Putin. Have you seen that video that's gone viral back from the 2020 campaign? I'm the one that Putin does not want in office because I'm going to stare him down. I'm going to make sure that his days of aggression with Eastern Europe are over because I'm going to put. So that video is coming back to haunt Biden big time. He lost Afghanistan. Now he's losing Ukraine. And the media, CNN and MSNBC, are literally doing everything they possibly can to try to turn this obvious defeat into a victory. I mean, watching it is actually really pathetic, and I mean pathetic sort of in its classical sense, in that it's tragic, right? Pathétique in the sense. It's like watching Nicolae Ceausescu. We did a video on that last week. This is Trudeau's Ceausescu moment. It's like watching Nicolae Ceausescu, the last Romanian communist dictator, standing out there on his palace balcony while the entire communist world is collapsing all around him in Eastern Europe. And he's standing up there like nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Everything's cool. And he actually assumed that all the people out there in front of him in the courtyard there of the palace right before underneath his balcony, he assumed that they all were going to listen to his daily spewed out lies as if they were truth. And by the end of that day, he found himself in front of a firing squad. And I mean, I see the mainstream media in many ways that way, you know, whenever they're covering Biden and that, like, look at our supreme leader standing up against the, you know, the capitalist, imperialist exploiters, blah, 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 blah. It's really hilarious. So we've got tons to talk about. Before we get into things, gang, just a reminder, if you're regulars, you already know this, but it is rhino hunting season here on this channel. We've designated the month of February Rhino Hunting Month, right? We're trying to defeat as many Republicans in name only. I prefer, by the way, Diablo. Have you ever heard Diablo? Democrats in all but label, right? I don't know where the O comes in, but it fits it out. So fills it out. So for those of you who missed getting tickets for our upcoming Rhino Hunting Boot Camp, our virtual conference on March 5th, where we're going to center in on how to defeat rhinos. We're going to do an actual training on that day where you just, from the comfort of your own home on social media, you can help to defeat rhinos. If you didn't get those tickets, they're all sold out, unfortunately. You could still support the fight through my Change America initiative. So just click on the link below, or you can go to change.turleytalks.com anytime during this live stream. We'll be here for a while. You're not going to miss anything. So, well, you'll miss some things, of course. You'll miss flashes of brilliance periodically from our comments, of course. But if you want to help fight rhinos and put patriots running for office into office, all you have to do is just live out your life. It's an amazing program. Change America is an amazing program where it rounds off your purchases to the nearest dollar and then uses that change to support nationwide patriots in the movement that's growing by the day and getting them into office. And we're doing right now, as we speak, a documentary on the rise of the American Patriot Movement. You're going to absolutely love the Patriot Movement that's going on right now. And so as a thank you, if you sign up to Change America, click on that link below today. You're going to get free access to my weekly exclusive Monday night live streams where we get to have something like this, but you get to ask me your questions directly. We do them every Monday night, so you're going to love it. So make sure to click on that link below. Support our patriots while defeating rhinos all across the country. Click on the link or go to change.turleytalks.com. Okay, let's dive right in here. So let's start with where things are right now in Ukraine, as I understand them, given my sources, okay? I do have to preface this, like I did in yesterday's video, like I'll be doing in our videos over the next couple of days, although this campaign, this special military operation should probably start to wrap up in the next 4 or 5 days. I guess that's what they're saying. We'll see. But right now we are in the midst of a fog of war, so it's not clear entirely what's true news and what's fake news. Frankly, 80-90% of the stuff I'm reading in mainstream media is just nonsense. But with that caveat, here's what my sources are saying where we are right now. Here's the state of things. First and foremost, obviously what appeared to be a limited excursion originally into the Donbass region of Ukraine has, or formerly of Ukraine now, has indeed turned into an utterly massive military offensive against the whole of the nation. It's involving Russian land, sea, and air forces. Russian forces are advancing from Crimea in the south, from the Kharkiv region in the north, northeast of Ukraine, possibly from Belarus in the north towards Kiev. This is an utterly massive offensive by the Russians. It does appear as of today that the Ukrainian Air Force and Navy are basically, they've been neutralized. They've been totally decimated. Al Arabia's reporting on this. Well, actually, they reported on it last night. So as I understand it, just within the first 12 hours of this offensive, Ukrainian Navy and Air Force capabilities have been wiped out. The Russian militaries, I've been doing a lot of research on this. The Russian military, and again, put in the comments if you know this and can add to it. But the Russian military strategy revolves around the notion of more or less completely wiping out the armed forces of their opponent. And that, in effect, is basically all they're interested in. They're not interested in dealing with armed insurgents. They're not interested in occupying cities and going door to door in these sweep operations. All they care about is crushing the military, the armed forces of their opponent. And the theory is that they're operating with is that once the army is destroyed, the political order of their opponents eventually and inexorably falls as well. Without the power of the military behind it, the government collapses. And thus far, it seems they are playing a textbook case study of this approach. The Ukrainian Navy has been decimated. Its Air Force has been decimated. And so, as a result, in effect, now, the remaining reported 60,000 Ukrainian troops, including the infamous Azov battalion, right? This is part of the denazification of Ukraine, as Putin calls it. The Azov battalion in the Donbass region, they've been effectively cut off from Western Ukraine, and they are now surrounded by Russian forces. Like a boa constrictor, basically. And as I understand it, it's called the Cauldron, the Russian Cauldron, and the 60,000 troops are going to be given a chance to surrender, and they know what's going to happen to them if they don't. They're going to be wiped out. They're going to be cooked, okay? As I heard it, within the next day or two, Ukrainian forces in the Donbass will either have surrendered or they will have been massacred. That's basically the two options they're being given. And that's how it works. That's how the Russian Cauldron works, and the Ukrainians know this. So the Russian offensive appears to be thus far a success. We'll have to keep an eye on Kiev today. I'm sure you read Russian troops took over Chernobyl. It's just north of Kiev, right in between Kiev and the Belarus border. By the way, hopefully you're looking at your maps, getting to know the Kiev region pretty well in Belarus and so on. So the key today, it seems, again, from the research I'm doing, is to watch what happens. It's twofold. It's to watch what happens with the Ukrainian forces in the Donbass, the 60,000 that have basically been cut off and surrounded by Russian troops. Watch what happens in the Donbass with Ukrainian forces, and watch what happens with Kiev, the capital city. Okay, so we'll have to see what happens there. As for President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, who was at the, if you remember, his phone call with Trump was at the center of the whole first impeachment fiasco. Unfortunately, many Ukrainians, expats, were aligning themselves with leftists in Washington, D.C. to take down Trump. They like Biden. Remember, Ukraine thought they could buy their way more or less into all of these economic, all aid and the like by basically bribing Biden, by making Biden and his son Hunter rich. Boy, did they get a bad bargain on that. But as for Zelensky, it's being widely reported Zelensky is now ready to negotiate with Putin and bring about a resolution to this. He gave one final desperate plea to NATO. I don't know if you caught this. Zelensky gave one final desperate plea to NATO to get rescued, to get him out of this. And he was greeted with crickets. NATO said, sorry, we're not coming. Which, of course, this is the stuff that pisses me off. I mean, it begs the question of why NATO ever put Ukrainian membership on the table. I mean, if no NATO nation is willing to come to Ukraine's aid at this dire time, why on earth why wouldn't they just agree to Russia's demands never to have Ukraine as part of NATO? What's the problem with that? That's what Tulsi Gabbard is saying. If they just did that, this whole situation could have been avoided. All right. But so, needless to say, this is a catastrophic failure on the part of Western powers. And Delio, well, thank you for that first round of vodka on me. Yeah, Delio. I mean, we're going to be talking about this and as we go through our live stream. But I think it's really important for everyone to recognize what we're seeing here is not so much, and I just need to be very forthright. It's not so much yay Russia, bad Ukraine. They're both, for me as an Orthodox Christian, this is a tragedy. I'm seeing Orthodox brothers fighting each other. This is a tragedy, and the patriarchs of Moscow and Kiev have come out. The old Kiev, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, not this new globalist construction they tried to do. We'll have to devote a video to that because that's going to be fascinating. What now happens with the new Ukrainian church that Biden basically brokered, but they're coming out and saying this is a tragedy. We need to pray for immediate cessation of violence and peace and bring Orthodox brothers together. This is not me, rah rah Russia and bad Ukraine. For me, the Ukraine is right now the center, the theater, just like in many ways Ottawa was last week or last few weeks. It is the center now of the clash of civilizations between the old neoliberal globalist order and the new rising post-secular, post-globalist patriot order. That's what's basically going on, and I'll explain that as we go through the live stream. So this is a catastrophic failure on the part of Western powers, no question about it. The two major reasons that Russia gave, that Putin gave in his hour-long speech to the nation for his so-called special military operation was, number one, the NATO expansion into Ukraine, and then two, Zelensky's call last week for nuclear weapons in Ukraine at the Munich Security Council. That was insane. This is the meeting that Kamala Harris was at, where she just utterly embarrassed herself, and she had that long conversation. We're talking about war in Europe. What is that? What is that bizarre kind of, shake she had? We're talking about war in Europe. She's all freaking masked. War. We haven't had war in 70 years. Tell that to Serbia, Kosovo. We haven't had war in 70 years. And we're talking about war in Europe. I mean, she was the most embarrassing freak at that event. But Zelensky at the same meeting said that he was entertaining the notion of bringing nuclear weapons into Ukraine, which was insane. It was an insane remark to make. And Putin seized on that and said, that's it. We're done. We're done negotiating. We're done playing around. When you start talking about NATO in our backyard and nuclear weapons in our backyard, we're done. So Zelensky gave his 11th hour appeal to NATO last night. He was greeted with crickets, and now it's being widely reported he's ready to negotiate with Putin. But again, it's all too little, too late for him. Putin is done negotiating, and the only thing now that's going to happen is a massive, what Russia's calling a demilitarization of Ukraine, which, as I'm interpreting, it's a significant crushing of Ukraine's armed forces, so as to make sure that this neutrality that Russia wants and that is demanded of Ukraine will be put into effect one way or the other. So Putin has been burned way too many times dealing with Ukraine and NATO, and he's done with it, at least from his vantage point. Geopolitically, now, so that's the theater of what's going on. Let's talk geopolitics real quick. The two single most populous nations on the planet, China and India, are expressing sympathies with Russia. Putin was geopolitically brilliant. Sorry, say whatever you want. He knew what he was doing. He has effectively immunized himself from any sanctions that could be imposed by the West that we're already finding out are pathetic at this point. But and with China, Russia, and India creating sort of this triangle here that, of course, signals a whole new traditionalist re-traditionalist, post-globalist world order, which we'll be talking about here in due course. China, of course, has been blaming NATO as the provocateur in all this. NATO's incessant eastward expansion into the Russosphere is the primary provocation, I should say, for Russia's actions. And Prime Minister Modi of India, now the Hindu nationalist prime minister, while he's certainly calling for an end to the violence, everyone's saying that, he's refusing to go along with the sanctions. India will not impose sanctions on Russia at this point, as of today. So Russia's effectively immunized itself from sanctions. And this is especially the case with the fact that the sanctions against Russia, as we found out in Biden's bumbling press conference, the sanctions against Russia will not include food and energy exports, which are its two major exports. Russia makes almost $1 billion a day on food and energy exports, right? They're the number one exporter of wheat. They're a huge, of course, exporter of gas and petroleum. And the bumbling Biden-led sanctions are not even going to touch this sector of Russia's economy. So these sanctions, in many respects, are relatively meaningless. And at this point, from what we're seeing right now, you can basically dismiss all this reporting coming from the mainstream media, including Fox, by the way, is all in on a lot of this nonsense, that Putin somehow overplayed his hand and people are rising up in defiance of Putin all over Russia. It's nonsense. It's far more people rising up in Ottawa. And keep in mind, contrast to the way protesters are being treated in Russia right now and how they were treated in Ottawa last week. That's all you need to know. Other than there were far less protesters in Russia. Most Russians are very much behind Putin on this. The cosmopolitan St. Petersburg, Moscow, Russia, no. I mean, the urban cosmopolitan globalist mindset, no. But the standard rural Russian, no, they're behind Putin on this. All right, so let's pivot to Biden. Things go from bad to worse for Biden. Before we, I guess, pivot, just remember, for those of you who just come in, remember February is rhino hunting month here on our channel. We're trying to defeat as many rhinos as possible, Republicans in name only. So for those of you who missed tickets for upcoming rhino hunting boot camp, you could still get involved through my Change America initiative. Click on the link below. Go to change.turleytalks.com. Help fight rhinos. Support patriots just by shopping. Basically, you're just going to round up. We have a software where you round up your purchases to the nearest dollar, and that change could be used to support patriot candidates all over the country and support patriot missions like film documentaries that we're working on right now in the rise of the new patriot age in our country. So sign up with our Change America program today, and you're going to get free access to my weekly exclusive Monday night live stream every Monday night. You're going to absolutely love it. So click on the link below right now and sign up with our Change America initiative. You're going to absolutely love it. All right, so bumbling Biden. I mean, what do we say here? Why don't we start with the polls? I'm just going to read some of the headlines for you. This is the headlines that I got from today. Fox News poll. President Biden not tough enough on Russia. New York Post. More than half of Americans give Biden thumbs down on Ukraine crisis. Another Fox News. New Yorkers souring on Biden's poll shows his favorability under 50% in the bluest of states. Fox News again. Fox News poll. Voters say the State of the Union is worse than a year ago. Newsweek. Joe Biden's approval ratings are terrible, even in blue states. Los Angeles Times. Here's why Kamala Harris's California poll numbers stink. This is from today. This is just a sample of the headlines today. I mean, Biden continues to collapse. I mean, there's no one has any confidence in this shell, in this incompetent and incontinent shell of a man. And all you got, I mean, seriously, yesterday's press conference, I mean, he literally looked like he didn't know where he was. I mean, it was sad. I mean, he just didn't know he didn't know what was going on. He thought these sanctions were working. Of course, he then turned around and said, well, no one said these sanctions were going to deter Russia. Yeah, yes, they did. Remember Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris. This is war in Europe. And these sanctions, as long as there is a diplomatic window, these sanctions will deter Putin, even although he has already made up his mind to invade Ukraine. But these sanctions can change that making up of his mind, so he can make up his mind not to go into the area that he already made up his mind to. What do you say to these clowns? And again, you have the mainstream media cheerleaders actually trying to make them look confident. Let's look at what social media had to say. Here's how social media reacted to this Biden fiasco. Mike Cernovich, you guys, I'm sure you all know. You have to own this. All 81 million of you. You destroyed military careers over the vaccine. Do you realize how trifling you look now? How pathetic and weak? Tonight is how human history really looks, you coddled, weak little brats. Tell us what you really think, Mike. Wow. Again, it is another Cernovich. Legitimately laughing at neocons posting videos of Putin arresting protesters. They arrested 2. They said 0 about Trudeau doing this. His cops beating the hell out of people, freezing bank accounts. You're goobers. You're complete jokes. And you have no power. Keep crying more. The future is populist. Amen. And he's right. We'll talk about why. A fellow by the name of Cat Turd wrote, "It only took a year for the basement dummy to destroy our economy and get us into World War III. But hey, at least you can get a free crack pipe." Cat turd. J.D. Rucker, "I admitted I was wrong. I overestimate how much respect Putin has for Biden. I didn't think it was much. It turns out it was none." Joe Concha, Dow futures down more than 800. Crude oil tops $100 a barrel. Most Americans will feel the pain of $6 to $7 per gallon gas. And after witnessing what unfolds in Afghanistan, now in Ukraine, they'll come to a logical conclusion about the current president and this administration. Well, we certainly hope so. That's for sure. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, she echoed the sentiment of many. I did a video on this on our newly woke military. Lauren Boebert, "I praise someone in our country's leadership is more concerned about Putin than pronouns." And Dinesh D'Souza tweeted out, "Suddenly Democrats who scorn the very concept of borders," what's a border, they would ask, "borders makes no sense in an age of global interdependence. They have suddenly become very attached to the integrity and inviolability of the Ukrainian border." So there you could see, and that's just obviously the tip of the iceberg. Now, what's unfolding here, gang, in dramatically horrific fashion, of course, and how India and China and much of the non-Western world is reacting, I would argue, is nothing less than the complete implosion of the neoliberal globalist world order, what we often refer to as the New World Order. And I don't think I'm exaggerating here in the least. And I bring to the witness stand as my evidence A, none other than the assessment of one Francis Fukuyama, who is the godfather of the neoliberal globalist order. In his end of history thesis, he has written a relatively recent piece for The Economist entitled "The End of American Hegemony." The end of American hegemony. And by that, what he means, it's the end of the American-led neoliberal globalist order, what we refer to often as the New World Order. It's over. It's gone. And he wrote this right after Kabul, and the events have just spiraled ever since. Now, if you're not familiar with Fukuyama, he's the author of what's known as the end of history thesis, okay? And the basic argument for the end of history thesis was that with the collapse of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day, 1991, we had reached what Fukuyama referred to as sort of the end of history. And what he meant for that is, for centuries, humanity's been struggling to find the ultimate political and economic system. And we've tried all these different options, right? But now, with the death of fascism and with the death of communism, the world had finally arrived to a consensus. And that consensus is Western liberal globalism. Western liberal globalism was the single best political system imaginable and was thus the standard bearer for a truly worldwide modern society. Now, of course, there were detractors to this thesis, huge detractors like Sam Huntington of Harvard. Huntington actually believed that what happened with the breakup of the Soviet Union and then the subsequent violent balkanization of Yugoslavia, that was going to happen to the Western liberal globalist world itself. In other words, the breakup of the Soviet Union was symbolic of a much larger crack-up. And that crack-up is the entire world political order that was built over the last century on the decaying foundations of modernity. Modernity being a one-size-fits-all, scientifically rationalist political and economic system that all the peoples of the earth were eventually going to adopt. And you basically had three options. You had Western liberal globalism, you had Soviet communism, and you had Nazi fascism. And what Fukuyama's mistake was for Huntington, Fukuyama's mistake was he didn't see that it was actually the modern world that was breaking up. It wasn't the systems per se. The Soviet Union, fascism, those broke up, so the winner is Western neoliberal globalism. No. What's breaking up are not systems. What's breaking up is the whole civilizational order known as modernity. So what Sam Huntington recognized was two things. One, the Western liberal globalist order was built on the philosophical foundations of modernity. Modernity being the 18th century notion that scientific rationalism can provide the one-size-fits-all answer to every question, but particularly political and economic. And then two, those philosophical foundations of scientific rationalist modernity have collapsed in the hearts and minds of the vast majority of Western populations. It hadn't even reached Eastern populations per se outside of China, and of course China's taking over Southeast Asia, but Africa and Middle East and so forth hadn't reached it. So what we're finding, or what Sam Huntington argued, is that Westerners no longer believed in the modern myth. Westerners no longer believed in the modern myth that scientific rationalism was a one-size-fits-all political economic system for all people, times, and places. So eventually, Nazi fascism was rejected through a war. Then the second option, communism, Soviet communism, was rejected, and that imploded. So that now today, Eastern European nations and Russia are the most patriotic populations on the planet. And the next domino to fall will be the Western neoliberal globalist system. That's what he argued. Well, guess who has joined the Sam Huntington bandwagon? None other than the godfather of the end of history, the neoliberal project itself, Francis Fukuyama. So he published this piece for The Economist. You guys want to check it out. Francis Fukuyama on the end of American hegemony. It was right after the fall of Kabul. Literally, August 18th. I think Kabul fell August 15th. And it basically admitted that we are indeed seeing the end of history, but it's the end of the neoliberal era. The neoliberal globalist era, the era of never-ending cringeworthy virtue signaling, the end of tiresome diatribes on the inerrancy of liberal democracy, the end of leftist wokeism and cultural Marxism, the era of big tech censorship, technocratic mandates, like that era is coming to an end. And one of the reasons, sort of the foundational reason he points to, at least in terms of how it's cracking, is very, very fascinating. The reason why, and again, it's called the American hegemony. The reason why an American-led, right, so this is deep state, permanent political class and DC-led neoliberal order. The reason why that America-led neoliberal order is cracking all over the globe is precisely because it's cracking up here at home. You want to write that down. That's a really neat way of thinking about things when you're talking about your friends of what's going on in the world right now and why the theater of Ukraine is happening as it's happening, what's actually going on. Because in many ways, I think it's it was Ukraine throwing their lot in with the neoliberal order, and now this is re-traditionalized, post-globalist, post-secular Russia coming in and taking it head on. So the clash of civilizations is what's happening right before our very eyes in the Ukraine right now. And if people want to try to understand why this clash is happening, at least at some level, they have to understand that the American-led neoliberal world order, is cracking up all around the globe precisely because it's cracking up here at home. I would add Ottawa to that as well. And interestingly, the crack up isn't over ideology, okay? If we want to put a little more meat into this analysis, the crack up isn't over ideology, okay? This was the end of the history thesis, by the way. Liberalism triumphed, right? Neoliberalism triumphed over the alternative and competing ideologies of communism and fascism. The 20th century was the century of ideology. But that era is gone. Or at least it is imploding. We're cracking up not over ideology. We're cracking up, particularly here at home, but all over the world, over identity. And that's key. And I think your liberal friends will get that with their love affair with identity politics, right? So what is identity politics, if you think about it? Well, identity politics is all about what does it mean to be an American? Who am I? What does it mean for me to be an American? As far as the woke left is concerned, to be an American is to be bigoted, unjust, sexist, and systemically racist. I should say. Whereas patriots see being American as being defenders of the eternal values of faith, family, and freedom, as enshrined in our Constitution. So you see, this is why the culture war has moved from, say, school prayer and abortion to now hitting every aspect of social and cultural life. Now today, with the advent of things like CRT and transgender bathrooms, now everything, kindergarten is controversial. Pronouns are controversial. Everything is controversial. And at the heart of this is the struggle over American identity. What does it mean to be American? Or what does it mean to be human? What does it mean? And this rift inside America is reflective of the massive rift that's opening up all over the planet between globalists and nationalists, secularists and traditionalists, the political class and the people. So what we're witnessing here right before our very eyes is nothing less positive vibes, catchy. Thank you, Wayne. How do you suppose Russia will affect Biden's legacy? Thank you, Wayne, for that. How do I think Russia's going to affect Biden's legacy? It is a little early to say. At this point, I think when all is said and done, against the backdrop of the fall of Kabul, this is going to be seen as another colossal failure for Biden. Again, they're going to do everything they can to rally us around, again, those old tiresome rah-rah democracy, rah-rah liberalism. We're standing up for our values. We're going to, but when people start paying $6, $7 a gallon in gas, I don't know how much they're going to be blaming Putin. They can't vote Putin out. So I think they're going to really be blaming Biden. So we'll see. I think Putin may be the nail in the coffin for Biden's legacy. We'll have to keep an eye on it. Great question. But I think we are witnessing nothing less than the clash of civilizations being carried out right before our very eyes. And our Western elite, our cosmopolitan elite, mocked Putin's hour-long speech in front of the nation is nothing more than the rantings of a megalomaniac. No less than National Review, once a beacon of conservative thought, which half the time is just an absolute joke. They ridiculed Putin, calling him irrational, unpredictable. The writer mocked Putin's historical take on the relationship between Russia and Ukraine, noting that the latter was created by the former at the beginning of the Soviet era, and blah, blah, blah. And yet not once in this National Review, I'm going to leave him unnamed, not once in this National Review article, in its sneering towards Putin, not once did this fellow stop to realize that Putin's entire speech centered on the notion of identity. The central question of Putin's speech is not a 20th century ideological question. What is it that we believe? Like these clowns in Washington, D.C. and CNN and MSNBC are doing. We stand up for certain values. Do you believe in democracy or despotism, capitalism or communism? Instead, Putin's entire speech centered on what question? What was his question? Who are we? What does it mean to be Russian? What does it mean to be Ukrainian? What does it mean to have to face down NATO? Who are we in relation to all of this? Are we a united Slavic people or not? This is precisely what Huntington predicted. The new politics were no longer going to be centered on ideology. They were going to be centered on identity. The conflicts of the 21st century are going to be conflicts centering on identity, not we believe in the values of democracy. This is why wokeism is already dead. It just doesn't know it yet. Wokeism is a radical, defunct Marxist ideology that had its day and will no longer find a place in an emerging postmodern, post-secular, post-globalist world. So this is precisely why, let's stretch this out a little bit. This is precisely why Taiwan is such a target right now. The American Embassy at the People's Republic of China has an absolutely unambiguous article on their website. And it's fascinating because their website this article is entitled Taiwan, an Inalienable Part of China. Taiwan, an Inalienable Part of China. And here's how the article begins. It's absolutely fascinating. There is only one China in the world, and Taiwan is part of China. The government of the People's Republic of China is the sole legal government of China. Now, you'll notice there's no hint of ideology there. Properly speaking, right? There's no isms. This has got nothing to do with Marxism. It's got nothing to do with communism or capitalism or socialism. There are no isms in that statement. It's not a judgment on Taiwan's political philosophy or their economic theories or anything like that. What kind of statement was that? There's only one China in the world, and Taiwan is part of China. This is a statement of identity. Taiwan is China. Ukraine is Russia. Gang, this is the new politics. It's a politics of identity. It's the politics of America first, and Russia first, and India first, and China first. It's the politics of nation, culture, custom, and tradition. We're no longer an ideologically ordered world. I know our permanent political class is so totally clueless to this. I know, I get it, right? But we are now entering into an identity-ordered world. The fundamental question is not, what do I believe? The fundamental question is, who am I? Now does it make sense why we have so many different gender specifications? Now do you see why BLM and La Raza and supposed white nationalists and different ethnic groups are becoming so prominent in our politics? Keep in mind, it works the other way too. This new politics is also the reason why, if you don't toe the line of the Biden regime or anything woke, you are denounced by an identity. You're a racist. You're a bigot. You're a sexist. Notice it's not you're a I don't know. You're a Jacobin. You're a socialist. You're an anarcho-capitalist. It has nothing to do with philosophy or ideology. No, you're a racist. You're a bigot. You're a sexist. You're all kinds of phobes. Or if you're in the case of Ukraine, if you don't buy the war pig cries, you're a mouthpiece for Russia propaganda. You're a traitor. You're a murderer, and on and on and on. Again, note, these are all different forms of identifications. You're either with us woke elites or you're one of them, the deplorables, the fringe minority, the Neanderthals. But let's wrap it all together. Here is the irony. You ready for this? And this is coming straight from Fukuyama's article. You're going to love this. Here it is. Oh, Green Janes. Do you think that USA manufacturers making a comeback? We learned enough from 2020 to realize what you're saying? Sorry, that went by fast. Sorry, Green Janes. Well, thank you for that $20 super chat. Yes, I do. I think inevitably what happened with the Trump years and that went on steroids during the last part of Trump's administration with COVID, and that went on in the world largely with COVID, is nations began creating and taking seriously their boundaries and their borders, and that's including the economic borders. So the fiasco in Europe was that they were way too dependent, for example, on Germany to get their vaccines, and so a lot of them, like Italy, if I recall, had to turn to China to get some kind of vaccine and viral treatment and the like. So they recognized at that moment, particularly in France, that they were going to have a domestic manufacturing machine as part of their national security. We are finding, when all said and done, that manufacturing and industry is an essential part of national security. As we're finding out right now, Europe's finding out right now with gas and petroleum, importing so much of it from Russia that they're not even touching what Russia makes $1 billion a day off of. So I think in the end it's going to have to come back. That's just the new politics. It's known as post-security politics, in order to create a sense of security in a post-security world where we're feeling border insecurity, economic insecurity, and cultural insecurity. Inevitably, we're going to tighten our borders. We're going to go back to industry. Nathan Ross, yes, the WEF awarded Putin as a leader. Wow, in '92, but he wasn't president until 2000. That's interesting. So I'll have to take a look at that. So yes, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. But here, let's wrap it all up, gang. Let's create, I think, a coherent whole for analysis. Sorry, Justin. Oh, no, it just shot past me. Your message. Why did it just shoot past me? I have it on slow motion. Where are you, Justin? Let me see. Hold on. I got you. Did you just shoot past me? Putin was awarded. Where did you go? There you are. Dr. Turley, can you give your thoughts on the origins of totalitarianism? Hannah Arendt and other book. What other book can you recommend for learning the higher levels of geopolitical politics? Oh, that's a great question. Thoughts on the origins of totalitarianism? That's going to take us afar, Justin. I don't know the answer to that. I just don't know the answer. Here, hold on. I'm seeing my. Did my screen freeze? Did I mess up? I hope I didn't mess up on something. There we go. Okay, my screen had frozen for a minute. Sorry. That would be for another conversation we'll have to talk about on totalitarianism. Geopolitics, I mean, gosh, there's so many. I mean, start with Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations. That's gigantic. That's so important with, if I recall, the 7 different civilizations that are involved there. Alexander Dugin is huge from a Russian perspective. Thanks for all you do. How do you think all this will affect the economy here in the U.S. groceries? Wendy, I'll get to that in a second. Thank you. Start with Dugin. Dugin is fascinating with his geopolitical theory. from a very particular Russian Eurasian perspective, and go with Sam Huntington. That'll at least get you started with it. I love, by the way, if you want to subscribe for anyone, I love the Duran Alexander and Alex there at the Duran. Their analysis is spot on. I love them. I try to catch them every moment I can. They're giving excellent Ukrainian analysis. I'm learning so much, particularly from Alexander. So go to the Duran. They're terrific with geopolitics. Phenomenal. Yeah, it's going to affect. This is going to affect us big time. Yeah, Wayne, you want some guitar, huh? I will do so. I've been getting a lot of requests for guitar lately. I'm gonna have to get the fingers back in shape. Yeah, we're gonna see prices go up big time. The U.S. biolabs targeted in Ukraine. I read a little something about that, about the U.S. biolabs, but I'm not sure. I can't comment on it one way or the other. The whole Chernobyl thing was interesting, taking over Chernobyl. But let's wrap this up. All right, we're going to try this. So here we go, guys. Establishment America, the permanent political class in the deep state in D.C., can no longer hold the neoliberal world order together anymore. It's a world that's dividing up along neo-tribalized identities. It's a world that American neoliberal globalists simply cannot hold together anymore. And do you want to take a reason as to why? This is from Francis Fukuyama. Why he thinks the neoliberal order is collapsing. You're going to love this. Because, as we're finding each and every day, we can't hold it together here at home. Write this down. America can't hold the world together anymore because America cannot hold itself together anymore. America cannot hold the world together anymore because America cannot hold itself together anymore. And that's the reason Fukuyama, the intellectual godfather of the liberal globalist order, that's the reason he cites as the primary mechanism by which the globalist world order is ultimately faltering. Which means this, you're going to love this. Let's bring this all the way home. Here's the amazing irony in all this. For those of you who were shocked at what we saw in Ottawa last week and all that, every single time woke globalists disparage us, every single time they crack down on us, every single time they try to excommunicate us and divide us, they are ultimately undermining and guaranteeing the collapse of their own neoliberal globalist order. Make sure you get that, and you want to share that with your friends. Every time they mock us and ridicule us, every time they call us deplorables or a tiny fringe minority. Thank you, Sam. Robert, nice to be part of a live video for the first time. All right, I'm going to get to you in a sec, Robert. Let me just finish this up. Every single time. I'm going to get you. Hold on, Robert. Where did you go? Where did you go, Robert? Where did you go? There you are. There you are. Every single time they invoke a state of emergency to crush our peaceful protests, every single time they disparage us as racist and sexist, they are further dividing our nation, and in so doing, they are inadvertently tearing apart the neoliberal globalist order abroad. They cannot hold together the neoliberal globalist order abroad because these leftist permanent political class freaks cannot hold the neoliberal order together here at home. That's the key to understand what's going on. Let me get you, Robert, for a second. What do you think would be the way forward politically? Is identitarian nation states or civilization states? Yes. Sorry, the answer is do I think it's going to be more the micro-identitarian, possibly even ethno-states, regional things as well, like Texas and so on, or is it going to be more civilizational, right? Ukraine is Russia, Taiwan is China, and the like. Yes, it's going to be. I think it's going to be both. It all comes down to identity, and how identity works itself out in particular regions. It's going to be a fascinating period of time. There's no question. But the map, remember, the map has changed nearly 40 times since 1991. Okay, there have been nearly 40 nations. I may have even surpassed 40 nations added to the world map since the fall of the Soviet Union. And it looks, we just got 2 new ones, right, in the Donbass, Lugansk and Donetsk. And now it looks, with reports of Russia taking over Odessa, Crimea, and so on. I mean, I think eventually all these are just going to be absorbed. These regions are just going to be absorbed into Russia, Greater Russia, Novu Russia. But we'll have to see on that. But that's so key, and that's what Fukuyama argues. What's happening in Ukraine is the shattering of the neoliberal globalist order. Why is it shattering? Because it's shattering because of the rise of a new politics. The rise of a new politics is no longer ideological, which is what a neoliberal globalist order by definition is, with it's ultra left democracies and free markets and human rights and wokeisms and all this sort of stuff. It's thoroughly ideological. That politics is being replaced by a politics of identity. And that identity is breaking everywhere, in the right, in the left, with BLM and La Raza and all that. It's breaking in everywhere. And what the politics of identity is doing is it's ultimately cracking up the ideological system that was holding it together. And how is it happening? It's primarily happening through the United States. Why? Because the United States cannot hold the liberal order abroad together because it cannot hold the liberal order here at home together. Every time they disparage us as bigots and racists and homophobes and deplorables and tiny fringe minority, every single solitary time they do that, they are further dividing our nation and thereby undermining their ability to hold a neoliberal globalist order together. Let's see if I can catch this one here. I gotcha. Where are you? Rock Dog. Dr. Steve, do you think that after this, if China invades Taiwan, there'll be calls to remove Biden and Harris and stop this far left push? And why? That's a great question. I don't know that. Again, the question is just, for me, is just how far gone is the deep state? Trump 120 becoming more and more obvious, even to the normies. Amen to that. To the deep state, if the deep state is just so Ceausescu'd, if they're so in denial of what's happening all around them. I mean, keep in mind, not a single Republican has stood up outside of Tucker Carlson, has stood up. And ironically, Tulsi Gabbard, who's sounding more like a Republican every day, a good MAGA Republican. I don't know what's going to happen. We just may have to wait for the next election and just blow them out. Rocky, do I see Russia using nuclear weapons? Shall I do I see Russia using nuclear weapons? Do I feel it will escalate to such an event? Should I use the answer that that Biden gave the other day? I don't know. Oh, that's reassuring. Good night, kids, and hope to see you in the morning. No, I don't think it's going to escalate to that. No. Zelensky cried out to NATO, help, help, help. Thank you, Brian. Help. And NATO gave him crickets. So that's why Zelensky is saying, all right, let's end this thing. Let's compromise. Let's go. Well, there's not going to be any compromise. There's going to be unconditional surrender, and that's that. Putin has had it dealing with Zelensky, who he sees as just a clown. Remember, he is a comedian. So and totally incompetent for this position. He's a horrible president, as it turns out. He ran as a populist. Interestingly enough, he ran as a populist who was going to be a bridge between Russia and the West, and he found that well, dude, we gave Biden a lot of money to make sure that we get all this aid, so we got to go and be a puppet to the State Department at this point. So no, I don't think this is going to escalate beyond Russia / Ukraine theater, but Taiwan, that's scary. We'll see, because obviously, look, Taiwan is going to be a part of China at some point. that really is baked into it here. I mean, you just go to Taiwan's the U.S. ambassador, the U.S. embassy's China's U.S. embassy website, and you'll see articles that Taiwan belongs to China. I mean, it's just but China's very patient. They're like the Ents in the Lord of the Rings, the trees. I mean, to me, China reminds me of those Ents where they were still talking about it. Just can we make a decision here? Well, they think long term, and I think the old joke was, what was the old joke? What do you think about the French Revolution or something like that? A Chinese official was asked that by a American diplomat, and the Chinese official looked at him and said, "It's too soon to say." So they have this real long-term history. But that's going to be, to me, it's going to be much more provocative. The United States has already said they were going to fight for Taiwan. So we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But anyway, gang, just make sure you get the full gist of the argument. What we've got going on in Ukraine right now is the clash of civilizations happening right before our eyes. The old ideological, what if China claims that Japan is... Oh, no, granted, outlaw. So outlaw brings up a great question. What if China just wants to grab Japan? No, absolutely. There's no question that this new world we're entering in, this post-globalist world, rooted in identity, is going to have some very, very serious situations, and wokeism won't be one of them. Trudeau's won't be one of them. But whether a China-Japan conflict, absolutely, and that's where the alliances come in. So Japan creates an alliance right now already with the United States as a protectorate, and so no, as long as Japan is an official protectorate of the United States, unlike Taiwan, they're not going to touch them because they would provoke a nuclear power. Everyone's doing what they can within the theaters where they're allowed to move, and obviously with NATO not coming to Ukraine's defense, they were a theater that Russia could move towards. The question, it's an open question with Taiwan. Japan's closed. It's a closed theater at this point. We'd have to, and then Japan, remember, has it has no military of its own. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It actually has a very, very large military and lots of military expenditures. It's not just the United States. But putting it all together, gang, the old ideological world is collapsing, and it's collapsing because a new world, a new politics of identity is emerging. It's no matter what do I believe. It's who am I. And that's breaking in even into the United States. So when you're disparaged as a racist and a bigot and as a homophobe because you're not supporting BLM, La Raza, and LGBT movements and the like, then you can see that identity politics is very, very divisive in this sense. And it, by its nature, cracks up and breaks up and balkanizes. And so the world as a whole is cracking up and balkanizing because the American neoliberal establishment cannot hold it together anymore. And the American neoliberal establishment cannot hold the world together anymore because the American neoliberal establishment cannot hold America together anymore. The whole thing is cracking. And the result, one of the results, is what we're seeing in Ukraine, where Russia is in effect saying, you belong to us. We've had it. We've given you your independence long enough. All you've done is made a mess of it, and we're done. We're absolutely done of it. Let's see. Kiefer, Russia seems like another necessary evil because the globalists have become so fecklessly horrible that there must be an equalizer, and I think his name is Putin. Just my 2 cents. I think you're absolutely right, Kiefer. I could not agree with you. And thank you, by the way, for super chat. Cannot thank you enough for that. And I can't agree with you more. I think you're absolutely right. I think what we're seeing now are forces like China, Russia, India, Pakistan that just visited Russia the other day. They got the red carpet treatment. Iran, Turkey, interestingly enough, has been moving closer and closer to Russia. you're just seeing the world move away from the neoliberal globalist, neocons, neolibs, and forming right before our very eyes a post-secular, post-globalist, post-neoliberal world order. The new world order that they were hoping for, of this one-size-fits-all political and economic system of wokeism, is dead. It's over. And so in many respects, we're watching Trudeau and Biden and Schroeder and all these guys just getting publicly spanked on the geopolitical stage. They're being shown up as being absolutely impotent, not just incompetent, impotent. They can't do anything. Even their sanctions are laughable. And so if Putin isn't afraid of them, as it were, why should we be? That's kind of what the message is. Rock Dog coming back. Thanks again for another one, Rock Dog. Do you think this might be the tipping point in the next few years in European elections, pushing in a right populist movement, voting out the old globalist order? We're going to have to see. I mean, obviously, we're making huge gains from the year 2000. Nationalist populist parties in Europe have increased by 300%. They've gone from about, more than that. They went from, it's just over 300%. They went from about 7% of the parties in Europe to today being 25% of parties in Parliament. So they're growing. There was a bit of a flattening out with COVID. Everything kind of stopped in COVID. So who knows what was going on there? But inevitably, as we're seeing, the Patriot movement is rising up again. We've had it with the COVID mandates, and that's putting Patriot politicians, the nationalist right, back into the spotlight again. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll see how things go. But yeah, eventually it's going to move in that direction. It's just that's going to be ideologically driven politics is going to increasingly look stupid. It's just not going to have a place in a new world centered on post-globalist identity. So, all right, gang, that about does it. We've been going for over an hour. Awesome. I love chatting with you guys. God bless you. Thank you so much for all that love and support. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you so much for that. Robert Livingston, thank you, brother. Very, very much appreciated. Guys, remember, if you haven't signed up for our change.turleytalks.com initiative, you'll definitely want to do that. Change America Initiative is going to be putting more and more patriots into office and getting rid of rhinos. All you have to do is sign up, and every purchase you make, it'll round off to the nearest dollar, and that change could be used to fund the defeat of rhinos, putting in patriots, and we're even doing a documentary film right now. It's going to be absolutely amazing on the rise of the patriot populist movement in our nation, which is symbolic of what's going on in the world. Gang, we'll be watching everything closely. If anything, any major thing happens again, I'll come back. And thank you, Robbie. God bless, man. If any major event comes, I'll make sure to do a live stream over the weekend. I'm in town this weekend. No American Freedom Tour stuff or anything like that. But until then, Godspeed. Stay in prayer. We always pray for peace in the world and the salvation of our souls. Ask God keep us safe, bless with peace Ukraine and Russia, and pray for God's blessing in the end of a neoliberal secular world order and the rise of a new patriot age. God bless, guys.